This is the Self-Taught or Not podcast with
Dylan Israel
and Eric Hanchett, where we teach you the do's and don'ts of software development from two software development professionals, one self-taught and one not. Hey everyone, before we start, I just want to give you guys a quick update. In this episode, we'll be talking a lot about what's been going on lately and how it's affecting developers everywhere. I've been thinking a lot about this and I actually want to help. I have a 10-hour course on Nuxt.js with an introduction to Vue.js. So if you don't know, Nuxt is this server-side rendered framework for Vue. It's really powerful, and I think you guys should really learn it. For a limited time, I'll be selling this course for 50% off. It's basically the price of a Udemy course. It's really cheap. To get this deal, just check out the show notes at selftaughtornot.com and click the latest episode link. You'll see the link there for it, and just go ahead and click it, and you can go ahead and get the course for 50% off. Thanks. Do you want to kind of lead us into the conversation, and I'll kind of just pipe in?
Yeah, we can do that, man. So today we have a little bit of a smorgasbord episode. You know, there's been a lot of stuff going on. You got the COVID-19. We're going to talk a little bit about relationships and dating, as my relationship, which is about 9-10 years, has come to an end. So some of the things we can learn about that, some of the cancellations, and just sort of this, it seems like to be that, you know, I saw a meme the other day that Kobe Bryant, R.I.P., passed away, and in a tragic helicopter accident. But the meme was Kobe Bryant holding the world together in 2020? Because it seems like everything's gone to shit since then.
Can we just do a reset on 2020? Can we just turn it off, turn it on, back again? Yeah, it seems like, Kobe dying, and then this COVID. I remember watching the news because I'm one of the, people are only in the 50s or 60s watch news nowadays, or at least like ABC News. But I guess I'm one of the rare people that do every day, or almost every day. And I kept hearing all these reports and online too, of course. Like, okay, there's this huge this infection, this disease, this virus is happening in China, and then I heard total lockdown. And then once I heard total lockdown in China, I'm like, oh crap, this is going to be big. And I remember telling friends just a month ago, hey, maybe we shouldn't travel. Maybe we shouldn't do this. And everybody's like, oh, this is all overblown. Nothing's going to happen. It's just a little bit worse than the flu. 80%, 90% of people just get better. And now it's worldwide pandemic. Everybody's indoors. I mean, anybody that's listening right now is probably listened to the news ad nauseum by now. But it's just blown up. It's been crazy.
Yeah, and I definitely was one of those people. Eric and I had plans to go to NGConf, which was a large Angular conference. Looking forward to it quite a bit. That got canceled, just straight up. So that trip's gone. I had a course planned with LinkedIn Learning, which they were flying me out to California to build. That got postponed. Just like everything's getting canceled. And there's, I don't know, I'm not that old, 32, but I've been talking with my parents a lot about this when I was back home, and they're like, none of this makes too much sense, in the sense of it's sort of a first for everything right now.
When they canceled the NBA season, I knew oh crap, yeah, something's happening. Yeah, let's go over this. What has changed for you personally since we started this COVID craziness? I'll go ahead and start. You just mentioned NGConf. Yep, I had a ticket. Well, actually, I was going to go to NGConf. I hadn't bought my ticket yet, luckily. And then when this whole thing happened, my work pretty much canceled all travel. I work in Reno, but I travel to Austin a lot. And they just canceled travel for the whole company indefinitely for we don't know how long. And then they changed it. All the conferences started closing. I remember even looking at something like Smashing Conf in San Francisco that was going to happen in a few weeks. And they were really trying to put that thing on. And then finally they're okay, we're going to do it in September. That's funny too with these. You mentioned NGConf. A lot of these conferences, I feel if they can't just refund all the money to the people, because if they do, they're literally going to go out of business. Because a lot of conferences now, instead of refunding people money, they're encouraging people to keep their ticket until the conference gets rescheduled. And the rescheduled times are all in September, October, November. There's going to be 50 conferences web development and software conferences in those times, because all these conferences have rescheduled during that time.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't know the intimate details of what the profit margins on conferences are, but you have to imagine their number one cost has to be the venue, right? And like it's just the the large space, renting it out. That's not cheap, and I'm sure all the flights, NGConf, if for example, will fly you out, put you up, and even give you a trained what do you call the train, like someone to help you train with your speaking.
Yep, like a speech trainer. Yeah,
Yep. And none of that's cheap, and most of those costs, the hotel and the venue is not going to refund that money. So how do you refund? You're out cash. And this is a venue that these aren't like, oh hey, we do a weekly conference. It's like a once a year thing. It's not like there's this huge, war chest going on for these conferences.
yeah, exactly. I went actually just a couple weeks ago. I went to ViewConf, which was in Austin, and this was in like the first week of March, and this is right when things started getting bad, but it hadn't been at the point where all the states started doing shelter-in-place orders. So, but people were started to think things were getting bad, and I remember going to it, and I was probably the most bizarre conference I've ever been to in the state that, in other words, it was not bizarre because the content was great, the speakers were great, but it was kind of the vibe of it. First, I've never been to a ViewConf before, but it felt like there was less people there, and there was people that left like halfway in between. Like it was a 2-day conference, but I would say most people, well, it's technically 3-day if you count the workshops in the first day, but I'd say like half the people were not there the second day. And the first day, they had a mention, a slides that said, by the way, make sure that you use hand sanitizer, you don't shake hands, and it wasn't social distancing at the time, but they're like, just be careful was the common thing on it. And I just remember, this is kind of a weird way to start this, and kind of add, put a little damper on the conference. I still loved it. I still liked meeting a bunch of cool people, and the conference speakers did a good job, but it felt like definitely it was a little different right away. And unfortunately, after that, pretty much I don't know any conference that went on after that. Maybe there was another one right after that in the first week of March, but it was. I mean, after that, everything started canceling, and that's when my work starts saying, work from. And another thing I forgot to mention too is working from home is just now a huge thing. It's just everybody, all these companies that kind of were on the fence from people working from home have just kind of pulled the trigger and said, okay, everybody works from home now.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the more interesting things to see if that is a long-term impact. So like, I work fully remote, and if there's one benefit that's going to keep me at my current job long term, it's simply that. It's not the pay, it's not the people I work with, although I love them to death. It's the full remote aspect. And a lot of people are getting a taste of that. And I'm wondering how much they're going to like it. Because I had a buddy call me on like a Thursday at 1 who he works at a major bank doing home loans. He's like, dude, this remote stuff's fantastic. I love it. I don't know that I'll be able to go back when when it's time. And it'll be interesting if companies, one, open up their minds a little bit and allow it to happen more frequently, even if it's just partial. Go into work 3 days a week, work remote twice, or two, if employees are less willing to work with organizations that don't value that.
I really hope you're right. I hope that companies, I really hope that companies think that working from home is a good idea, and that this little experiment the next few weeks kind of opens their eyes, because I really think that there's no reason for a lot of tech workers, a lot of information workers to even be in an office. Now, you could make the argument that you're missing the water cooler conversations, and those are very important, and you're missing that interaction with other people, which is very important. But you can kind of simulate a lot of that just through Slack, or through Slack, through your chat, through Skype, phone calls, Zoom, whatever your video conferencing tool is. So you can kind of simulate some of that, but I think this is a good trend. I've always been sort of remote because we have a small team here in Reno, but most of the people I work with are in Austin. So we've kind of already been working remote. So it's not that huge change. It's just instead of going to the office, I'm just pretty much working from home. But it's very, very similar to working remote. I know. I think it's a good situation. I know I was just listening to another podcast the other day. It's I'm not going to name any names, but it's these three women that do this podcast, and they were saying that they had a lot of disadvantages. They did not want to work from home because they said, or work remotely, because they really enjoyed that human contact that you have. Because we're humans, we're social creatures, and that being in office, they just felt they felt less lonely. And I could see both ways. Like us, like I'm a little more introverted. I can get lost in my work. You put me in front of a project, I can I can I'll look at the clock. It's 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. Next moment I look at the clock, it's noon. Next time I look at it, it's 3. I can definitely have days like that sometimes when I'm just so focused on work, and it doesn't bother me. But I could definitely see this is not going to work for everyone. So I guess I have mixed feelings on it.
I mean, I have a direct feeling that if you if you don't like working remote, great, but don't let that mess it up for me. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's think of what are some other things that have changed in the last
So,
couple of weeks.
yeah, I mean, I think there's some very practical stuff that is changing or going to change, and you're starting already to see it, right? So, the unfortunate truth is that you can't really have businesses shut down completely, and that's sort of what's happening right now. You're having, as these companies shut down, companies are no more fiscally responsible than the average individual. They can't afford not to be open for hours upon hours, and so layoffs are coming. People aren't collecting checks, and that means that people are organizations are going to start freezing hires. It means that maybe the job that you have, they're not bringing enough revenue to build that new project. It's a scary time for any sort of industry at this point. Definitely scary for some other certain categories, but it's a little bit worrying.
I wonder if it will be like dominoes falling. We'll start with the service workers out there, the guys working at fast food places and restaurants and gyms and any place that is pretty much closed down right now for the foreseeable future. I mean, we're hoping that it's only a few weeks, but if this stretches on for months, you can imagine that these people, I mean, they're just going to have to, all these people are going to get laid off, and some of these businesses are going to go out of, some of these businesses are going to be closed forever, indefinitely. And that's going to be a major impact onto the economy, and that's going to trickle up to everyone. So if these small restaurants are closing, there's going to be there's going to be less money in the economy. Lots of goods and services will be purchased. These large tech companies probably start with these small mom and pop shops, these web development shops that really rely on you know these businesses in town are not going to have business anymore. Businesses are going to be scared to spend money. So like these web development stops will stop. Web development places will stop um, earning money, and they'll close down, and then it could even trickle up to larger corporations, and they'll start doing hiring freezes. I mean, I'm just looking on Twitter the other day, and I know, Dylan, you don't use Twitter too much, but I'm starting to see more people saying, "Hey, I just got laid off from my job. Do you know of anybody hiring?" And then people are retweeting their tweets. I've seen a few places are still hiring. I think Amazon is one of them. That if you are into big tech companies, Amazon is slammed right now, especially in their warehouses. I don't know how much they're slammed in their tech workers, but I'm guessing they're still full speed ahead. I know some companies are canceling their internships for software developers. Some are just placing them on hold and pushing out the start dates, or they're doing fully remote internships. So, and then I know a lot of companies are doing hiring freezes. So it feels like we're starting to see that very little bit of an edge start to go up of where people, where these tech companies, these software companies are starting to scale back a little bit and starting to reevaluate. Do we need to hire more people? Do we need to? Should we put a hiring freeze on? And then if it gets worse, and in a couple 2 or 3 months we're still like not fully going, I could imagine that that we're going to be in a bad situation. And it kind of reminds me back to 2008 and 2009, 2007. I don't know, Dylan, if you were in the, I think you were just starting to get into tech back then, or
Yeah, I was out there slinging pizzas back in 2008, 2009.
so I had graduated college in 2007, and my first job was in really getting my first job during the height of the downturn in 2008 was really tough, and there was a lot of people that ended up losing their jobs. I finally got hired onto a company, and we went through every year. There was a 2 or 3 rounds of layoffs, and luckily I was okay with it. And actually, I did get laid off in 2009, and then it took me weeks to get a job. And then the company I joined then still had more rounds of layoffs. So I think that was a weird time for a lot of companies, and there was a lot of layoffs. And I really hope that this virus doesn't cause the same situation to happen. I'm hoping like 2 or 3 weeks happens, we all come out of our quarantine, you know, the schools start up again, the economy starts jumping again, maybe they start reopening restaurants. And I think if we can get ahead of this in the next month or two at most, then I think we're going to be a lot better off if this drags on past the summer.
Yeah, but I think all of us should, and blanket statement, not a financial advisor, real quick. But I think all of us need to be prepared for the worst case scenario, right? We need to be, prepared and make sure our war chest, our rainy day fund is a little bit larger than usual. We want to, make sure that if we can take advantage of, financial opportunities in the stock market, that you can, right? Take 2008, 2009, for instance. If you, for instance, invested towards the bottom of the market, at the height of the market, you'd have 4x your money in about 10 years, which is kind of ridiculous. But it's mentally, I think the best thing all of us can do is just try and do our part, mentally prepare, and be prepared for the worst. That's really all you can do. I mean, hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Now, would you still, at this point, are you confident enough if you, like, let's say you didn't have a job, would you, well, let me try to phrase this the other way. Do you think someone out there that is has a job right now, should they be, and they're in the tech industry, you know how us being in the tech industry, a lot of us change jobs every year or 2 or 3, that they should look for another job right now? Is it okay to still look because there are companies hiring? Is it still okay to try to transfer even though you might be the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak?
Yeah, right now, I mean, it all comes down to uncertainty, right? I've been in the position recently where, we're sort of are there's not a lot of room for growth in terms of income. And so more so what I'm currently looking for is just something steady that I like. Now, if you are in the position where you just started your career and you can go and get a 30-40% raise, I think that justifies you progressing your career as you normally would. Now, if you're in the position where all of a sudden you're looking at a 5 or 10% raise. Well, I think right now is the time to hunker down unless you really just have all your T's crossed and I's dotted financially, right? So, like, you have no debt, you have 6 months to a year. Like, normally I would say 3 to 6 months of expenses is fine. When something goes like this, if you're not 3 months, go to 6 months. If you're 6 months, go to 9 months, right? If you're 9 months, go to a year. And if you have that, then you're able to be more risk adverse. But it really depends on your individual situation. If I was looking, I probably would stay where I'm at until things sort of calm down, and not sort of try to rock the boat too much.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think it's really hard if you have the opportunity right now and you're making $10 an hour and someone's going to offer you your first real web development job at $60,000 a year, or you're making $40,000 a year at some mom and pop web dev company, and there you could have an opportunity to move to a big company and make twice as much. Maybe it's still okay to move. I mean, there's still some uncertainty that you might get laid off in 6 months or a year, but that's a lot of money to say no to.
Yeah,
There's
I
some,
mean, I think it's just it's sort of a risk versus reward thing. If the reward isn't that great, then and the risk has increased, because I think we can all agree that the risk has increased in terms of the job market, in terms of layoffs. Like, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the risk has gone up just by the natural state of all this. That maybe you need, if that reward needs to be a little bit bigger than usual.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit bigger. Well, I don't think I have too much else to say on this crazy time we're living in right now. But everybody stay safe and stay home if you can. If you're in an area that's asking you to, I think that relatively speaking, that many of the people probably listening right now are younger people, and or people that are probably less prone to be able to to die from this disease, or to die from this virus. So we are in better shape than definitely a lot of older people. Of course, we could still transmit it. I'm not saying everybody should go out, but I think in general we should be okay, at least physically, and we could just hopefully the economy will be okay for us to still have a place to work after this is all over.
Yeah, just one last thing that doesn't have anything to do with software engineering, but does have to do with this. Times like these are can be character defining moments. You know, as you just mentioned, the younger people aren't. I in Florida, for instance, people are going to the beach right now. Like, you have teenagers and young adults going to the beach and not just caring about anything. And I just read a story about a group of brothers who went statewide in, like, Dakota or something like that, and when all this happened, and took two pickup trucks and bought every single thing of hand sanitizer in the entire state that they could find at, like, Dollar Generals, and then relisted it on Amazon. Guys, let's you know that this is not an opportunity to take advantage of, right? It's one thing to go and buy stocks when they're lower, and you have the additional capital. It's another thing to go out and do things that are actually going to physically harm people. And I just want to, like, I'm not a perfect individual. None of us are. We all make mistakes, but let's have some character in hard times, I guess.
I agree. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I saw that on the news the other day on the spring breakers, and the guy's like, "I don't care about the coronavirus. Just want to go and party, man." I'm like, oh, "You are an idiot." That's why I was thinking, like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Oh. I'll have one final parting thought too. I'm just thinking that as this goes on, and like I said, I'm gonna hope for the best, plan for the worst. But one thing to think about is I wonder if we do go into a recession, if the crazy high salaries for software developers will go down. I think that we are paid really well. Many of us are getting paid six figures. I wonder if that will still be the common. It will still be commonly to pay software developers for six figures, especially if we have a recession and there's a lot more supply out there. Out there, then will that drive down prices? Maybe if, heaven forbid, one of us gets laid off, that we can't get a job making over 100K. Maybe we have to get jobs making 80K or 70K or 60K or something like that. I'm wondering if how that would affect wages of everyone. I don't know. What do you think?
Uh, I think if they paid me any less, I'd probably just do YouTube full time. That's what I think. But no, I mean, it is a valid fear, right? I don't. I mean, it's simple supply and demand. I'm not a believer that it will really have too much of an impact, simply because the demand is still so much higher than the supply. But it'd have to, if there is some serious, like anything else, if there is some serious repercussions, it could happen. Now, the good news is that at in terms of companies that can employ software engineers and tech workers, those are typically very high profit margin companies due to the nature of tech, and they're they're able to do a lot of what their core business is based off of digital assets rather than physical assets and lots of overhead. Not to say that, other things closing down aren't going to have impact. It obviously will. But I mean, it if it gets bad enough, the unfortunate answer is yes. But I think it's a little bit premature, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is all just conjecture right now. We're just all trying to think of the worst case scenarios that could happen. Speaking of YouTube, I wonder, this might be the best time to start a YouTube channel, to start a side hustle, because yes, I mean, we're all a little nervous if people are buying courses and buying things. I don't know. I'll just publicly ask you, do you think your course sales are down, or anything's down in your side hustle stuff since this all happened?
It seems to be about the same. I don't follow it like day by day, and with all this coronavirus stuff, it definitely seems like you get a month's worth of news in a day. So maybe I should be. But generally speaking, most of it's pretty straightforward. Most of it's pretty much the same. Um, but who knows how that turns out long term?
Yeah, I definitely think. I think for right now, like I'm looking at my stats, my YouTube. My YouTube has been, if you don't know, you can go to eric.video. Give myself a little plug there. Go to eric.video. You can check out my YouTube channel. And it's been pretty much doing really well. I've been doing really well since February, March. I've had some videos go relatively viral for my niche that I'm in, and I haven't seen the last couple of videos I released the last 2 or 3 weeks. They're getting about the average amount of views I normally get, so I haven't really seen any problems either. I've been checking. I do sell some courses on Udemy, or not Udemy, but I do sell some affiliates. I'm affiliate for Udemy and a few other places, and I haven't seen too many impact yet. So, if you are out there and you're a little worried, you might want to think, hey, maybe I could start a YouTube channel. Maybe I can do some of these other things that I hear Dylan and Eric do, because you can make a little extra money. Now, something like YouTube's going to take a while. There's a lot of YouTube channels out there. We're actually thinking about doing a YouTube best YouTube videos. I think that'd be a fun video. That might be our next one. Like our favorite channels, I should say.
Yeah, channels.
I'm sorry, not YouTube videos, let's say, but channels. Let's move on, though. I know we're kind of halfway through. I think I want to touch on this, though, because we mentioned at the beginning of the episodes, as relationships. We are kind of living in uncertain times, and I think you've had a lot of changes in your life recently, Dylan. So I'll let you take this one, and wherever you want to go and talk about relationships, and especially relationships with software developers. I think that's an interesting topic.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, my ex girlfriend and I are no longer together, and it's been an interesting couple weeks. It's I've only been a software engineer and had a single relationship in that aspect, and I often wonder, and I wasn't really even going to talk about this, but when I did a live stream, so many people wanted a video about what it's like dating as a software engineer and like what I learned, which really surprised me. I didn't think people were going to be interested in the slightest. Like they're not. I thought maybe they'd be interested in the juicy gossip, like, oh man, what happened? All that sort of stuff. But they more so were very practical and was like, yo, what was the deal from a intellectual perspective?
So, what was the deal?
I I I mean, so for me, and this, I think, to relate this to other people, I should put out the blanket statement that I'm going to talk a little bit in generalities, not necessarily because I care about talking about my personal situation, but because she's not here to speak for herself, and also some of the things I'm going to say are going to stereotype developers. Um, so in my circumstance, I think a lot of software engineers have the ability to get very laser focused, where that's almost part of the job, where you can just hone in on a single feature, hone in on a single technology, and you can hone in so like visually and mentally that you can see when there's a semicolon out of place. Like that's something a lot of people can't do. It's actually one of the harder skills to develop. And then you add that and you take this aspect of, again, generalizing here, that a good portion of developers, myself included, would consider themselves introverts. And so sometimes what ends up happening, at least in my case, is that you focus on one thing so hard, and then, compiled with the stuff that maybe you don't pick up on signals, or you're not really paying as much attention, because you're sort of introverted, that you miss some things along the way. And I know in my case, I just worked too much. Like that there's a lot of things that resulted in, but the core root cause was I worked too much and I was too focused on other things.
That is a perfect way to put it. I've actually had the same conversation. I've been married for 12 years to my wife, and it's definitely one of those things that kind of pops up during the relationship is that, us as programmers, as Dylan has said, we can get laser focused on things. It makes us probably the reason why we're pretty good developers and programmers. We can sit in front of a computer for hours on end and look at something and be lost in it and not, we can't even hear things around us once we're super locked in. I've had that happen where I'm at home and I'm thinking of some problem I had at work or some issues that I'm dealing with, and then my wife's like, Eric, 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 are you listening to me? I'm like, what? Because that's kind of how we work, and if it gets too bad, you can literally miss really important things, and you can miss different cues and different subtleties that happen, especially around your spouse. And you have to be very cognizant of to turn off that kind of superpower that we have as developers, where we're intellectually just focused and honed in on things, and be able to come home and be able to to turn all that off and be like, okay, now I need to exactly see what's happening around me, and be able to pick up on the cues when my wife is upset or happy or things like that. And, that's kind of definitely I felt that before too.
Yeah, and I'd say for me personally, I think the strangest thing, and it's so cliche, is that because you're so laser focused on this stuff, is that you never see it coming. Like I know I have no doubt that from my conversations that there were hints or there were this, there was that, but I mean, you're so focused on other things that for whatever reason, in one ear out the other, and it's a strange thing, and it's hard to turn off. Like I find myself now, I still don't have a lot of free time because I mean my schedule really hasn't changed all that much. It's I spend a lot of time working, and we could probably talk about what it's like being a workaholic and how that impacts your life because that's sort of part of it. But it's strange to try and explain that because at the end of the day you don't work for yourself. Like all the things that I was laser focused on was for an us, but now it's just for an I, and it's sort of strange because it nothing's changed, but at the same time the motivation's slightly different.
It's also, if you're a workaholic like Dylan and it's also, you have to realize too that, yeah, your work, if you have a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, then you are sort of working for them too, and you kind of put yourself in that mind like, well, it's okay I work these extra hours or I put in all this extra time because now we're going to make this amount of money, and really I'm doing it for both of us. But you have to really make that really clear to your spouse or significant other, because it may feel like to you that you're working all this extra hours and you're doing all these things for both of you, but the other person might be like, I don't want you to work all these extra hours. I'd be happy if you just came home a little earlier, and we don't have to have all this extra money, or something like that. So work, I think, is very tricky. I think I mean, we always think about the worst case scenario, like when you don't have any money, and then that how crappy that is. But it's a weird scenario when you're actually starting to get money, and it still feels like you're still having the same arguments or the same problems that you had when you didn't have money. And that's where I guess communication would come in. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on that last bit there because it's not that it's. I mean, what at least in my circumstance, from what I think from the workaholic and just being so laser focused, is that there's a breakdown in communication. Again, a very cliche thing, but it happens where one side is not, happy, and the other side's not picking up on that. And at some point, it boils over and just explodes. And then at that point, it starts making you're like, oh, you're upset, but it might be a little bit too late. Um, but it is sort of hard to turn it off for me at least. I could tell you that I don't use this word lightly, but I'm somewhat traumatized by past financial ruin or past financial decisions. And I've always wanted to make sure that I never go back to that. And it in some degree sort of impacts you. And so sort of to your point, my thought about money is very much like my thought about health insurance, is that when you have it and you don't need it, you don't care. But the second you don't have it and you do need it, it becomes a real issue. And so like my objective has always been to avoid that. And sort of the funny thing about that is, the idea there was to have a better relationship, because, the number one and two things that break up relationships is infidelity and money.
Do you think so? If you look back at your relationships, and I'll talk about it too. When you didn't have money, was there more arguments about money, or was it the same amount of arguments about money when you had money? In other words, did money solve a lot of problems, or did it just add new problems?
So there was never any arguments about money because we didn't have any money. There was stress about money. The stress of figuring out how we're going to buy groceries, the stress of how we're going to, quote unquote, do the bills right now instead of having things set up to auto pay, and that stress of life, which is a very real one for a lot of people. Like the majority of people, I think I read that 70 or 75% of Americans can't afford a $400 bill. You're living paycheck to paycheck. That's a very stressful lifestyle to live in. And I've done that for the majority of my life. And being able to eliminate that stress is a huge thing. Now, so in that aspect, I think it's just the stress. Nowadays, it's not the or I guess in recent times, it's not that money caused the issues. It's that the um the obsession of avoiding the failures of the past and not having the time for other things caused the issue. I guess, if that makes more sense.
So it would be like now that you have more money, as software developers, we're usually paid pretty well. Hopefully, that'll continue. But so you usually end up getting paid a lot better. And by the way, I'm going to preface to say that we are very privileged people, and not everyone around the world has this privilege. And if you live in India and you're a developer, you probably don't make as much as a US developer. I understand that. But yeah, it feels like now the problems has shifted from the stress of not having money and being able to make your mortgage payments or apartment payments to now it's like, do you spend too much time trying to make money? Are you working too hard to make more money? Or in my instance, I'll be frank, sometimes it's like, what do we do with the extra money? Do we save it, and do we try to save it all so that way we can maybe buy rental properties one day, or do we kind of be comfortable in the lifestyle that we have? And it doesn't matter if you're making $1,000 a month or $10,000 a month. There's always things you can do to spend it on. You could be in a nice middle class neighborhood and have a nice income, but there's always going to be improvements to the house you can do. There's always going to be a new car that you can buy. You can easily spend all that money every month and live comfortably. But now you could have, but if the spouse doesn't want that type of lifestyle, maybe the spouse is thinking, well, we went through some hard times. Why don't we save all this money? Why don't we try to buy something big and use this thing to build money? Then it becomes a disconnect. So it feels like, at least personally for me, I think I don't have as much stress about making the bills, but we still have arguments about money.
Yeah, and sort of to the first part of this conversation, and one thing I wanted to touch on is that the work I'm talking about has nothing to do with my career. In terms of being a salaried employee, it's about all the extracurricular stuff that's there for if that's not there. And so, one thing I hope people open their mind to through these, if hard times come, is not having your eggs all in one basket via the employer to employee relationship, and all of a sudden you have nothing coming in. So I think putting that extra time to give yourself that sort of security, passive income or semi passive income, is something that I value quite a bit, because I have come from a past where there hasn't been any money, and I have been laid off before, and it's something that I didn't stress about nearly as much because I had some additional revenue coming in.
Yeah, for sure. Uh,
One thing I also wanted to touch on, because this was a very common question about this, was, do I regret working too much? Like, do I regret what has happened. And the honest answer is it's been a couple weeks. I'm still somewhat not my normal self, but looking back, I have my moments where I regret it, and I have my moments that I don't. Um, but when I think about it logically, and I was to say, well, what if I worked less and I didn't work on these passive income streams that these projects that have helped propel my career and bring in money and I enjoy doing, and the relationship still ended? Would I regret that? And the truth of that is yes. And so I sort of a lot of these things there's no easy answer. Like how do you balance your time and money and your goals and your dreams? Sometimes it just requires sacrifice, and you don't know where that sacrifice is going to come from. But at the end of the day, your hard work and the things that you're working on are not going to abandon you or leave you, right? That's something that you're going to have control over. And those are things to work towards. But, that's sometimes it requires sacrifice of like I've joked that I traded in my 6-pack for 6 figures. And that's that's true because I mean the time I used to go to the gym 3 5 days a week, and the time that the where I get the time for side projects is I had to hand that in. Like I just didn't have the time to do both. And it's unfortunate, but I think somewhat of that, and this goes to, again, the sort of logical nature of the brain of developers, is sometimes you sort of evaluate the pros and the cons. Like I know a lot of the issues that resulted in me working too much was things that I was aware of, not to the extent that how bad they were on my partner at the time, but that it was okay because I'm doing it for both of us and I'll make up for it later. And so sometimes you can be a little too overly logical in something that not isn't necessarily logical.
I want to go back to what you said earlier, though. You're talking about when you say you're a workaholic. You're a workaholic. You do your job at work. Obviously, you do a good job, but you're not putting in 1,000 extra hours of work, and that's your like most people who are listening right now. When they think workaholics, they're thinking you're spending 10 hours a day at work, coming on the weekends. But you're talking about no, I'm going to spend that extra time I have on my own personal projects because I own those personal projects, and the more effort I put into those, potentially more money and success I can get out of it, I guess.
Absolutely. And that's I've talked numerous times about how I don't work overtime. And like I might put in 5 extra hours a week when needed, but that's sort of the cap. My personal projects, those are the things that those are my small businesses, if you want to think of them that way. Those are the things that I am putting my time and effort and energy in. And, I don't really have any hobbies anymore. Like this is my hobby is my personal projects. This podcast, the book I'm writing, YouTube channel, the courses I'm building, the mentoring, the consulting I do, all these sorts of things. And to me, those are the items that are, are going to be there long term and have lasting impacts that I can directly control. Me working for somebody else, it's up to them when they don't think I'm a valuable enough asset. I'd rather go and create my own assets than be somebody else's.
Yep. And not to say that, I mean, I think I can speak in behalf of Dylan here that, we love our jobs. We love the challenges. I love my coworkers, my bosses. They're awesome. But, there is some stuff we do on the side that we have a lot of fun with too. And as long as we were okay working on that as well.
Yep.
All right. I mean, that's all I got.
Yeah. The one last thing, I think it
Sure.
goes without saying that I am 100% in the right and she is completely wrong. No, I'm just kidding. But
Yeah.
life happens, guys. Yeah, some craziness going on in 2020, man. I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm waiting in Florida for talking about like the trifecta hurricane coming or something. I don't know, like recently a gasoline hurricane caught them. It's like they've got gasoline hurricanes, man. Oh my god, it's craziness out there.
Yeah. One thing too, I mean, with all this craziness going around, I just had this thought pop in my head. This is a great time to learn technologies. It's a great time to, instead of just Netflixing and chilling at home while you're at home, just hey, maybe it's time to like pick up that dusty C# book off the shelf or learn Vue.js or take Dylan's 100 algorithm challenge or something like that. At least, I'll give ourselves plugs, but try to do something useful with the time that we have while we're all cooped up quarantined for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I know one thing too is, I don't know if you felt this, and I saw this kind of sentiment on Twitter. Since a lot of people are freaking out, I'm almost certain like the productivity of all these new workers, people working at home, isn't quite as high as it used to be. I think people are kind of not killing themselves at home working during this time. So I think that gives a little bit more time also to learn these new technologies and do these other things. I think a lot of companies don't expect tons of productivity during this time. Obviously, if you do nothing, you're going to get fired. But if you're not, if things slip a few days, I think it's probably okay.
Yeah, I think most companies are pretty reasonable. They understand the situation that society is in. Kids are at home, and you're trying to do your job and whatnot. It's a hard time for a lot of people. It's a hard time to be single too. Oh my God, man. What's going on? Quarantine and chill, right? Isn't that what the kids are saying nowadays? I've stocked up on TP, ladies. But I got bottles of water. No, but yeah, it's hard time to socialize. Lots of craziness, but we'll all get through it.
Yep.
All right, we'll leave it at that.
Later.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to find more about what I'm up to, go to dylanisrael.com.
And if you want to know what I'm up to, you can check out my website at eric.video. If you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And if you do, you might even be featured on our next episode. Don't forget to check out the website at selftaughtornot.com. From there, you can sign up for a mailing list where we give away free courses and a bunch of cool stuff. And we'll also let you know when the next episode comes out. And finally, if you didn't know, we have a Facebook group. It's called Code, Tech, and Caffeine. We have over 10,000 members, and you can find the link at selftaughtornot.com. So come join us. We have tons of developers willing to help you guys, mentor you guys. Check it out. Just make sure you go to selftaughtornot.com and check out the Code, Tech, and Caffeine link. Thanks, and take care.